I'd like to just quickly share a little bit information about our presenter, Kelly Braun from Kasson-Mantorville. She is the Director of Teaching and Learning for their public schools. Prior to this role, she was the Title I coordinator and an instructional coach at Kasson-Mantorville, a literary specialist in the Rochester Public Schools, and a classroom teacher at Byron Public Schools. You must have been like a child at that time to have gotten all of this under your belt.
I was a child prodigy, Amy. That is not really showing my age, it's simply my smarts.
Kelly also does adjunct faculty work. That had a hard time coming out for St. Mary's University in Minnesota, Master's in Literacy program, and on occasion does some educational consulting work with other school districts. Her Strengths Finder top 5 are develop, empathy, connectedness, maximizer, and relator. It's those 5 strengths that are behind her professional purpose and the very high expectations she holds for herself and her teammates. She does what she does so that people feel supported and empowered to be simply awesome for the young lives they are impacting. She does what she does so that teachers are inspired to remember why they became a teacher. Words to inspire us all. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Kelly. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks. And that was a mouthful. I didn't realize I even wrote that much. It sounds so conceited when I listen to it, but I'm like, I do. So when I think about my purpose, like Amy had said, really ultimately my purpose is to inspire teachers to get back to the reason they became teachers. And because ultimately, if they're motivated and they're feeling good about where they're going and what they're doing with students, then students are going to follow suit on that. So, and that really is going to lead us into this whole effective teaching is effective teaching regardless of what learning environment, teaching and learning environment that we're in. So, one of the things, so what this is going to be really interactive. I really, like I said, like if this is too quiet, then I'm going to reflect on that and be like, wow, you need to work on your, inspiring communication skills, Cal. So, I did create a Jamboard, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Jamboard. It is an app on Google. So now my fear is if you don't have Google that you might not be able to open it, but I will share my screen just in case.
You can, even if you're not a Google user, you can still get in.
Outstanding. Perfect. And so this was just a way for, I will say this, that it's a way for students to be able to do the whole sticky note thing, like we all love to do in education. But one thing that we learned is you cannot track who wrote what. So I am trusting all of you as professionals to write and share things that are professional. So I am going to share this screen and we're just going to get started here. So, before I begin, I'm just going to show you this book. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Distance Learning Playbook by, it's Doug Fisher, Nancy Frey, and John Hattie. John Hattie is a professional crush of mine. So we did take our new teaching crew. So all our staff in years 1 through 3, so our non-tenured staff and any tenured staff that were wanting to take this journey. We did do a book study around this year, and they had a monthly assignment for their portfolios towards tenure. So what I loved about this book was it's sharing and talking us through the things that are effective, because I think we felt like all of us needed to I felt this from teachers. I felt this as an administrator as well, was that we needed to come up with something brand spanking new when, we went distance. And that really wasn't the case. Like the things that we might need to learn about Google Classroom or different ways to get kids to interact. But ultimately, I think what we're going to find throughout our discussion is that a lot of the great things that we were doing are great things that we'll continue to do, because just what we should be doing. So I am going to, in the chat, share this Jamboard, and you can go ahead and click on it. I'm also going to share my screen so that y'all can see this. And what's odd for me is that I can't see all of you, but there we go. And I'm totally okay if you're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I wanted, expected. I don't want you to feel stuck because there's only a few of us. So if you're like, I'm going to pop into another one, go for it. You will not hurt my feelings, but I will take notes. So when we think about, when you think about the learning that occurred. So one of the things that John Hattie talks about in this book is that, you know, and I wonder how many of you would agree with this, is we weren't necessarily putting on our amazing hat to make sure that teaching hat to make sure that all our students met the MCA standards this last spring. We were actually doing crisis teaching. Like when we think about all of the things that students were going through and that we were going through, just human beings, we learned a lot. So what I want you to do is, if you're familiar with Jamboard, is right here is a sticky note. And so what did you learn from crisis teaching? You just take that sticky note, and I'm going to say human being or human doing. And so that was one of the big things that I learned during that time, was we needed to take care of the humans before the humans were going to take care of the doing. So what I want you to do is just take this, create a little sticky note, type on that sticky note, what did you learn from the crisis teaching? And then what will be useful in the future? So I'm going to say, take care of the people you lead. And that is one thing that I think was totally evident. We talk about that, but this was the real deal this spring. So one of the things that Winston Churchill says, I have that quote, is never let a good crisis go to waste. And so what is it that we're learning that's making us better tomorrow that we'll keep? So go ahead and take your little sticky note that educators love to work with. And I'll give you a couple minutes to do that, and then let's chat about them.
Kelly, there's a comment in the chat that it's view only.
Well, what in the world? I'm going to change that. My apologies. All right, you might have to refresh, but otherwise permissions are updated. Thank you.
Somebody said they got bumped out, so I would just offer, if anyone's having difficulty with the Jamboard, feel free to put comments into the chat, and I can put them in onto Post-it notes for you as well.
Are you able to get in with edit access, Amy?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, I can get in.
Perfect. It's so true.
Kelly, can you just rephrase what you'd like people to do? It sounds like at least one participant, when they got bumped out, didn't hear the instructions.
Yeah, you bet. So on a sticky note, just list one thing that you learned during that time of crisis teaching this spring. And quite frankly, I feel like we're hitting it again. I say that as a parent whose kid just got quarantined today, after she asked me to prom, of course. But so I feel like we're still in that. She's a woo. And so for her, being quarantined is like the ultimate dagger. So yes, like what did you learn from crisis teaching? And then what are you going to use in the future? Like what are some of the things that that you'll continue to do after we get back to normal, whatever that might be. Yes. Always stay flexible. Yeah. Yes, I just love all of this. Like, I think that is, and I encourage you to unmute and take part in this conversation. Because I think that was whoever wrote families can and want to do the best for their child. What was really neat was I remember at the beginning of so I will date myself now, Amy, at the beginning of my career, we did do home visits. We did a lot of them, just to talk with the parents about what, their hopes and dreams were for their students. And we had that opportunity to have that conversation, and you could see the love in the parents' eyes. And I feel like this was that silver lining to see that they did I felt like a closer connection with families. Zoom IEPs are convenient for many. Absolutely. Teaching science without bodies in a lab or without materials was awful. Who wrote that one? I can't tell. So
it actually came through on the chat.
It did.
By GG7W.
Sorry, that's sorry, Deneen Bagley. I'm not sure why I keep getting bumped out and I can't, my name never shows up. So I keep renaming myself and then it goes away again. So
sorry, Deneen.
Yeah, I can't imagine, because there was that, when I thought about like, obviously the labs, and then I think I earned a CTE certificate actually this spring, as well, as we were trying to figure out how to do welding virtually. So obviously we didn't make that happen. So don't ask me if that is something we'll be using in the future, but absolutely. So being there for my students and not focus much academics during crisis learning because they are scared about the future. Absolutely. For those kids who were maybe weren't sure, maybe didn't have the knowledge of COVID. I think everybody, or they couldn't see their grandparents, hug their, maybe mom and dad were on the front lines. The experience was challenging as a student in ED as well. There was no in-person learning in the classroom. Absolutely. It is good for people to relax. It is good. Did I get that? It is good for people to relax. Remember to react. Don't overreact. Absolutely. I'm still learning. Unequal opportunities come out in distance learning. That was definitely, equity was something that definitely came out. We just talked about that in the previous session. And offering opportunities. We were really this spring trying to find opportunities for students to explore science, engineering and math and all the STEM things. Like, how do you obviously you can't do that technology without a device, but that trying to find those ways for students to engage in science without having to have any fancy materials or robots or anything like that. I feel like we talk a lot about those things, like the fancy cool stuff. And not everybody's able to, to have those at their fingertips. And so I think that was one of those things that I felt was kind of, it was probably stressful because we were in the moment, but I look back and we really had a lot of fun, like, ooh, let's find this or let's do that. Conferences via Zoom are very convenient for teachers and the parents. Higher participation from the families this year compared to last year. Absolutely. So I don't know how many of you have done this in the past, but taking conferences to the parents. And even then we weren't able to do that because we weren't able to be in person. I know I've done conferences with teachers and parents at McDonald's. I've also done it at Walmart. And so, and companies that are very willing to let you come in, but obviously at this time they weren't. As far as being useful in the future, it is very important to take care of yourself, and we're going to talk about that. That was one of the very first things we talked with our staff about this year was, what is your take care of you plan? And who is that person that is going to be taking care of you should you get into that? You know, stress can also cause people to be very paralyzed and not be able to do anything. So who is that person that's going to be connecting with you so that you can continue to be the teacher, or at least part of the teacher that you want to be? Give the best that you can. Zoom one-on-one interventions can be productive, less distractions and interruptions. Absolutely. Talking to them about their fears and worries and just letting them talk it out with me or their classmates. Yep. And we're going to find that when we get to the next slide about relationships, teacher-student relationships have, and I'm not going to let you know because I'm going to do a little activity here next, but I think it would be a surprise at the overall effect size of that, but that is actually the foundation behind the effect size of other instructional strategies that we'll talk about. And then Zoom IEPs are convenient for many. Absolutely. I think that's one of the things I've loved is before, we were actually just talking about this today, is before I would have been late for a meeting, but today I'm never late for a meeting because it's just a click away now. So that's outstanding, especially when you live in, you know, your meetings are in Rochester and you're half hour away. So awesome. Anything anybody wants to comment on this? I am horrible at wait time. So when I was when I was observed as a classroom teacher, I always got docked for wait time because awkward silence. So next on our Jamboard is, as you know, these are and you look at that, I'm sure many of you have seen the effect size range, knowing that the 0.4 is like that sweet spot that we're going to get a year's worth of growth. And then below that are just simple teacher effects, developmental effects, and then the reverse effects, which we're going to avoid the red. And we're going to stay in that zone of desired effects, which means that we're getting, if we're implementing these things, it's more than a year's worth of growth. So I want you in the chat right now to think about what order would these go in? So which one do you think has the most effect? And which one do you think has the least effect? Anybody want to take a guess actually instead of the chat to just say it out loud? I'm starting to get self-conscious about my ability to get people to communicate and chat.
I would say teacher-student relationships is the most effective.
Okay, I'm going to put this over here. What do we think is the next one?
Feedback probably, or teacher clarity.
Yep. Okay. Whoa. Save that. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate that. Craig, where are you at again? Are you at Plainview?
No, I'm in Caledonia.
Caledonia, your brothers are in Plainview,
Yep.
right? Did you grow up there?
I grew up in Houston.
Houston. Oh.
So
A place on Mooly Cooley Road. What do we got, Amy?
Hey, come on, you don't know where Mooly Cooley Road is.
Yeah, we have a house down there.
Oh my God. Yeah, we've talked about this before, haven't we?
I think we have. Yeah. Yeah,
So
if you
funny.
saw the woods almost burning down, that was us a couple weekends ago.
So Kyle in the chat said feedback first, then relationship, then clarity, then credibility.
So we've got, oh, that is like display. It's going to be big. So we're going to say Craig said feedback.
Then relationship. Then clarity. And then credibility.
I always call it street cred because it sounds funnier, but anybody else want to take a stab at it? All right, well, here we go. So we're going to go in order here. And the first one with almost, this is crazy, like almost 1.5 to 2 years worth of growth is teacher cred. And when we think about teacher credibility, that comes with how do we build trust? How are we showing that we are competent in our instruction? Dynamicism. And this was a word that with new staff, we were kind of joking, we're laughing about, because I'm like, I have never heard of that. And basically that's just saying, you know, there are times in our careers where we probably, you know, you have peaks and valleys and everything, in every relationship and everything we do in life. And dynamicism is saying, this is hard, but I got to show up and win the Academy Award every single day and show kids that I'm excited about the work that we're going to do. And then immediacy, and what that is, you know, getting to know your students, something personal about each of them. And so the students know that they know when you don't know their name, right? And they know it when you don't know anything about them. They're pretty, I mean, you know, especially teenagers, like they're pretty savvy, and sometimes they're very truthful. And sometimes I know I've been left feeling, oh my gosh, that hurt, because you totally hit that on the head. And so that is what that immediacy is again, teaching with urgency, but not to the point that we're causing undue stress for people, for our students. And so I think that goes back to what someone said on that first slide about the focus, not so much on academics, but mostly about where they are social emotionally. And that is very important with teacher credibility. And so when you think about the different environments that we were in this spring, like what did that look like? What did building trust and showing competence and making sure you were dynamic and winning the Academy Award every time, and then really connecting to kids, what does that look like in each of the different environments? Are they the same? Is it different? What do you think? Crickets. So I'm going to say like this. So when I think about the trust and the dynamic, I'm going to go dynamicism right now, is that what I saw from teachers was the excitement around really finding new things and getting kids engaged in them. When I listened to and finding those free resources, oh my gosh, like we were, teachers were finding those new resources, being excited about them. Ryan Christensen, Amy, it's just one of those adjunct. Being excited about Generation Genius and taking advantage of the free trials, and then saying, this is really cool stuff. And you can do science, you can do this DIY activity without anything, without any money. And in that, you're also building trust, because kids are seeing that you recognize that they don't have money. Maybe my mom is, she's a waitress at night and at one place, a waitress during the day, and now she's out of a job. And my dad doesn't live with us. I mean, these are, it sounds really dramatic, but these were things kids were dealing with. And so showing them that they could do science without the fancy schmancy, without all the money that goes into buying things, that really does build trust, because it's showing that, you are understanding and connecting to them. So I think those are the things, that's one of those strategies and the things that we do face-to-face, hybrid, or full distance, is I feel as though we will continue, and it looks the same, as we're always trying to find different ways to connect to kids. And I think when I think pre-COVID, pre-shutdown, oftentimes we got into that, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Like, why do we have to do so many things? And then we got into spring and it was like, let me do whatever I can to help them out. So any other things on teacher cred, street cred, making sure that I was kind of, I have my oldest is a math teacher up at Kenyon Wanamingo. She's a middle school, high school math teacher this year. And we had a great talk about this because her kids felt really comfortable to talk to her about a hard topic the other day. And she's like, I didn't know what to do. I'm like, be thankful that, you know, they want to have that conversation. So teacher cred is important. The second biggest is that teacher clarity. Organization. How am I organizing those things? How am I showing examples, and how am I guiding their practice and their assessment? So when we think about those things, am I organized? Am I making sure that we have the learning targets there? I know that these seem like really simple little things, but one of the things in this book that we really enjoyed, so for any of you who are thinking that you'd like to take this journey with this book, I know it's distance learning, but quite frankly, it is something that we will use year after year in our new teacher academy. Is that it provides that success criteria and what are my learning intentions. So when kids come to that Google Meet, when kids come into the classroom every day, I'm at the door waiting to say hello. I'm on the Google Meet waiting to say hello. And I'm making sure that I'm setting those learning intentions. And how are you going to know that you learned this? So I think one of my favorite things was during the shutdown was I went to see how my little second grade nephew in Byron was doing with the online, because I wanted to see what would this look like, you know, once we were all, you know, back in person. How does a teacher, like from a parent, I was trying to take the parent's perspective or auntie's perspective, like what does it look like? And how do they keep that organized without the, you know, the kids going crazy? And it was so fun he goes, okay, auntie, you can't say anything because we are supposed to come in and we are supposed to be quiet. We can say good morning and then we have to mute. And so I thought, teacher clarity, boom, right there, made it successful. It was not an Animal House when he entered there. He knew he had to get on the screen, he could say good morning, and then he had to mute. And he also had to remind auntie that she had to do the same thing, except for I could not be on screen. So I thought, you know, that is, if second graders can do this, these are things that we can do with our high schoolers as well. This afternoon when I went home to check on my senior, because sometimes seniors, when they get quarantined, think it's okay to just maybe head to Chipotle or something. So I went in to see how she was doing, and she was there on mute, listening with her camera on. That's an expectation of their teachers, that their camera's on, and she taught them how to do the background because she wanted to see their faces. And so Amy, I really appreciated that you had said that at the beginning, because it is hard as human beings to have a conversation. I mean, I do talk to myself in the car a lot, but it's so much better to even see your faces. So you know, making sure that those things are clear and setting those safe boundaries. So anything else on teacher clarity that anybody else, I mean, and I will say this before I go to the next slide, is that face-to-face, hybrid, or full distance, those things are important. And as far as staying organized, making sure students understand the expectations, providing those examples, and then really setting those learning targets and success criteria for students so they know what's going on. Because they're going to be, you know, in a distance environment, they were struggling with internet, they were struggling with all of things. And so making sure that they had set criteria was very important. The next one was feedback. So that is 0.66. And one of the things they talk about in this book, and I put it at the bottom, was that the relationship between the person providing the feedback and the person receiving it has a mediating effect on the usefulness of the feedback. So you're going to see here that teacher-student relationships are 0.48, which still slides right into that sweet spot. And this is actually, when I think about this, this is important so that when we provide them feedback, kids are going to use it. They're going to respect the person who is giving that feedback to them because they showed that they cared. They also, so when we think about those relationships as well, so Craig, I do think you're right. As far as research goes, it's a 0.48, but you know what? I am going to listen and I am going to want to do my best for those learning targets and teacher clarity because my teacher built a relationship with me. They know me. I'm gonna I'm gonna have that trust in my teacher, and trust is actually one of the big pieces of building relationships with kids. And so guess what? I'm gonna buy into what my teacher's doing, and she or he is gonna have incredible street cred because they built relationship with me. And so when we think about that feedback, it's personalized. We're understanding those socio-emotional links to our feedback, and we're identifying formative, summative, and then those grading. How many others had like headaches over grading this spring and even this fall? Like holy buckets, right? And so I think one of the things that we found in feedback, what was really great about this spring, and even when we were maybe forced into a distance or hybrid situation this year, was that we got way better at formative assessment. I don't know if any of you saw that as well, but we found ways to get that quick. Put in the chat, you know, the top 3 things that you learned today, or the top thing that you learned today, or, you know, post it on your Jamboard. What did you learn? And so I think we got really good at formative feedback. And one of the things that our new teachers, when we met with our new teachers during New Teacher Academy, just to check in to see how they were doing with feedback, was they said that what they really saw, the silver lining of feedback was that they were very specific in their instruction. They didn't worry about all the other stuff, the things, I mean, and that's a hard part. You get really excited about the stuff as a teacher. But what they did was they were really focused on the learning targets and the standards, and all the other stuff kind of fell off to the side. And so their instruction was focused. And that is really what students want, right? Students are in there to say, you know, don't teach me what I already know, teach me what I need to know. And that's where that personalized piece comes in, as we were really now starting to provide kids the instruction that they actually needed, not what we thought they needed, right? And so one of the quotes in here that just made me laugh was about worksheets. And of course, I'm not going to be able to find it. I should have put it in there. But we have a different term for worksheets. After working with some, we kind of changed the EE to an I in worksheets, because that is what they are, right? It is just literally, I mean, I can't say that. I was going to say that, well, I'm just going to admit it. Yes, there are some worksheets you can find on the internet and they have the answers right on them, because if you're doing Teachers Pay Teachers, or here it is, too many worksheets that are not tailored to student needs, but rather what we think they need, is not effective in any environment. So hopefully worksheets, EE replaced with an I, are things that we're not going to do anymore, because we want kids to show how they know. So, but that was one thing that I like to see, especially with, so Jessica Marquardt was one of our teachers she teaches elementary science, and she was the, oh, Amy, what is the name of that award again? Outstanding Educator for STEM. And it was great because she put out videos in our student newsletter about things that they could do outside, and showing how they know science and all the concepts that go with that. And then here we are with teacher-student relationships. So that teacher empathy and unconditional positive regard. What in the world is that? Well, that is, how will your students know you care about them as people? And so if you've ever heard of Top 20, I'm a firm believer in human being before human doing. And so And kids want to know that you actually care about them. Genuineness, how will your students know you care about yourself as a professional, right? And so that's really important. And I never thought about that until we went through that with our new teaching staff, is that, you know, you really have a great respect for yourself, and not that it's conceited, but that you're like, hey, I expect you to not have your hat on, or I expect you to have your camera on while we're in class. Non-directivity. So how will your students know you hold their abilities in high regard? And that is, you know, that goal setting and understanding and saying, you know what, I know the strengths that you have and I want to see them. And then encouragement and critical thinking. So fostering that communication and that interest in what they think about a topic. So that you aren't always the sage on the stage, which I feel like right now. And so I feel like I'm totally going against everything that I feel about instruction. So and then the last piece that I'm going to touch on before our time is up is taking care of yourself. And so this was actually the first thing. So none of this happened. So we have worked with, we had Dr. Clay Cook from the University of Minnesota come down and work with our administrative and counseling staff just to help us with that social emotional piece. And he spoke of, and he said it obviously more eloquently than I'm going to, but basically that unhealthy adults, the residual of that is unhealthy students and unhealthy children. And we know that from the work that we've done with families, right? And so as we've gone through this journey, was we expected our new teachers and our veteran staff is, what is your plan for stress management? What is that? My plan for healthy eating, my plan for getting regular sleep, my plan. Oh, I put that twice. That must be really very important. I must have copied and yep. So I didn't mean to put that twice. And then what's your exercise plan? It was funny because I was working with a consultant, actually our director of employee engagement and strengths-based culture. I was talking to her and she said, you know, I have a great respect for healthy professionals. She goes, because I know that the work is going to get done because they take the time to work on themselves and hold themselves to a healthy standard. So I know that they're going to do that for their employees and for the work that we'll do with strengths. And so making sure that those plans were, that our new staff filled those out and that they had a commitment partner, right? Like, I know I've heard a lot about, you know, oh, take care of yourself. Well, for some people, they were in such a tornado of emotions that they really didn't know how to take care of themselves. And so it was important that they had that peer or that mentor or, you know, anybody, even if it was, I don't know how many pamphlets you've handed out for the employee assistance program, but I've handed out quite a few this year. Same with our instructional coaches to say, you know what, we care about you. And here's someone you can talk to that we, you know, the district will never know. It's just someone, it's kind of just a caring ear to talk to. And so who is that person that's you're gonna share your self-care plan with, and what do you need from them, and communicate that. And then how many times are you going to check in? And it sounds like a goal setting meeting. It is. It's a goal setting meeting to make sure that that you're taking care of yourself and that you're leaning into that. Vulnerability has been like the big buzzword as of late, right? And so being vulnerable and saying, hey, I need help taking care of myself is a big thing. So I'm going to stop sharing. And we will be wrapping up in about 5 minutes. Perfect, Amy. I don't know if there are any questions. I hope that you gleaned something from this, at least one thing, and you weren't totally like, oh my gosh, I feel bad that I couldn't exit this because there are so few people. But is there anything anybody wants to share or talk about or wonder about? I am open for questions, or if you want to email me, I will, I can put my email in the chat box, but.
I will just share that this print right here was right above Mooly Cooley, Oak Ridge Challenge. So,
That is Awesome.
Yeah.
Wait, now Oak Ridge. So we have something called the Oak Plat. It's like the oak, that's kind of where my kids can actually get cell service. So
Mhm.
that's awesome. So actually, when we talk about your self-care plan, like being down at the farm, we call it the farm on Mooly Cooley, that was my stress management. And so being able to be down in the woods and hike and be scared of the hole in the side of the hill where I know that we've got a couple bobcats on camera. So of course I always thought I was going to be eaten, but I think the rush of that was a lot more healthy than being around crowds of people. But that was my stress management plan. And my husband was my commitment partner for that. And he made sure he loves being down at the farm. So that's awesome. So who drew that? Painted.
Michael Sieve. He's in Sieve, Michael Sieve. He has tons of prints from that area.
Yeah, if any of you have never been down to Houston area and want to Google Mooly Cooley Road and I mean, it was kind of the hot road when they were redoing the pavement. And so it got a lot of traction, but it's a good stress relief down there. Especially because your cell phones won't work.
Any other discussion items or questions for Kelly, or things you'd like to share about what your district did? We've got a few minutes.
Is there one more session after this one, Amy? Yeah.
Yep.
And
All
it's
right.
okay, awkward silence. So I think there's.
Well, I want to thank you, Kelly, for sharing all of these resources. Please feel free to reach out to her by the email in the chat with any follow-up questions after you've had a chance to process.